more pictures, material like that, but I'm still working on it. So I think it's a little unstructured and chaotic, but anyway, I think still there's going to be hopefully some very interesting material that we'll be looking at. And we'll see if the main thing is also kind of fit what I have into the time slot we have. That's often, that you generally only find out by actually doing it sometimes. So I'm somewhat experimenting on it all right now. So, but I gave this presentation, it's titled Dvapara Yuga, and then back to the Stone Age. And it's, I'm trying to see if we can look into some history. History for something like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago. When they say, well, what do they say and what do we say? Of course, their idea is was something like this, I think. At least something like this, at least. That's the idea. It's you can see, but modern civilization, as we know now, is a very recent phenomenon, and the first cities arose something like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, and as you go back like 10,000, 15,000, etc. back, we're back in the deep Stone Age, when people, they were either hunter-gatherers or very simple farmers, and they didn't have any knowledge of any high technology, any anything metals and so on were unknown, and that's generally the idea. It's an extension of the theory of evolution, by the way, which everything starts primitive and becomes advanced, and that's also extended into our idea of history. This idea of Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, which we're familiar with, was actually invented by, I don't know if can you see the name? No. Okay. Christian Jürgensen Thomsen. I thought that he should be there because he's Danish. And he was so that's one reason to have him, because he was Danish. The other reason is he was actually the world's first archaeologist. And he was the first one who really got into collecting stones and digging and excavating and making collections. And the Danish National Museum in Copenhagen was founded by him.
When did he live?
You have the years here, 1788 until 1865. So it's kind of he's actually just after the Napoleon Wars. That's when he founds the National Museum, and he's the one who makes this classification: Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and he and it's simply been kind of continually since him. And of course, he was a Dane. He was working in Denmark, and I think actually it might pretty much be that this classification works pretty well for a place like Denmark or Sweden, because at least according to what scientists geologists are saying about like 13,000, 15,000 years ago, this whole place was just one big massive of ice. 2-3 kilometers of ice just covered this whole area, and then it melted, and then it's natural after that. The whole thing starts from scratch. So you have some sporadic hunters coming and gradually developing from that. So it's probably pretty accurate for Northern Europe, but is it accurate for the rest of the world? And it seems this is what had happened. This same classification is just trying to fit it into for the rest of the world. And of course, I think it's clear, at least Dvapara did not agree to that kind of history. I have couple of quotes here from Bhagavatam. It's understood that not only at the present moment, but in those days also there were skyscrapers. Herein we find the word Hamya Priste. Hamya means a very big palatial building. Svat Vimana means from his own airplane. It is suggested that private airplanes or helicopters were also current in those days. Another quote here. This is from Krishna book, about description about construction of Dvapara. It is stated in Yuga-Back that this new well-constructed city, developed within the sea, had regular planned roads, streets and lanes. There were also well-planned parks and gardens filled with plants known as kalparixas or desire trees. These desire trees are not like the ordinary trees of the material world. The desire trees are found in the spiritual world. By Krishna's supreme will, everything is possible, so such desire trees were planted in Dvapara, the city constructed by Krishna. The city was also filled with many palaces and gopuras or big gates. These gopuras are still found in some of the larger temples. They are very high and constructed with fine artistic skill. Such palaces and gates held golden water pots, kailasas. These water pots and the gates on the palaces are considered auspicious signs. Almost all the palaces were skyscrapers. And one last. This is fourth canto describing the rule of Maharaj Prithu. Sattvik refers to the 7 great islands and continents on the surface of the globe: Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Australia, and Oceania. In the modern age, people are under the impression that during the Vedic period or the prehistoric ages, America and many other parts of the world have not been discovered, but that is not a fact. Prithu Maharaj ruled over the world many thousands of years before the so-called prehistoric age. And it's clearly mentioned here that in those days not only were all the different parts of the world known, but they were ruled by one king, Maharaj Prithu. The country where Prithu Maharaj resided must have been India, because it is stated in the 11th verse of this chapter that he lived in the tract of land between the rivers Ganges and Yamuna. This tract of land, which is called Brahmavata, consists of what is known in the modern age as portions of Punjab and northern India. It is clear that the kings of India once ruled all over the world and that the culture was Vedic. So that's something also I will try to look at. Is there any historical evidence that actually Vedic culture was all over the world? Is there any historical evidence that there was advanced civilizations on this planet? And also, and this is one of the unstructured things, I'm just going to switch between 2 PowerPoint presentations here. I'm also going to, it's searching for evidence of worldwide Vedic culture in prehistorical times, but also I'm going to discuss a little about the actual authenticity of the Vedic scriptures and if actually historical narrations in the Vedic scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, Ramayana, are they actually correct? Some think they're not correct. For instance, one famous person wrote or said, generally Mahabharata is taken to be a historical work, but in my opinion it's not so. I cannot say that Ramayana and Mahabharata are historical works. They are simply religious works. If you're still inclined to treat them as historical works, then I should say that they're nothing but the history of the self, Atma. They do not contain what happened thousands of years ago. Gandhi. He also said, Krishna of Gita is the embodiment of pure and divine knowledge, but without having any physical existence. For this, the avatar Krishna is not denied at all, but only it is said that he is mythical. Gandhi. Here's another, this is another Indian professor. Ramayana and Mahabharata do not have any historical value. These 2 epics are simply mythology and nothing but poets' fancy. Neither Ram nor Krishna was a historical personality, and both of them were simply mythical. So I try to I try to look at a lot here within this. So, because what can I say? So again, we have these conflict ideas about history. We would say, past history, something like this. Dwarka, and actually well-planned cities, beautiful buildings, organized society, and so on and so on. And others, they say it was something like this. Was it either or? Let's have a look at what's around. At least one thing that is for certain is that you see a lot of stones, whatever you know. For example, this stone. Someone knows what this is? Seen the stone before?
Is that Turkey or?
Close, not Turkey, no. It's close. This is Lebanon. This is Lebanon. This is called the stone of the pregnant woman. It weighs something like 1,100–1,200 tons. Here you have, here you have something idea about how big it is by comparing to the man there. It's still in the quarry. It has never been. It has been cut and like that, but it has not been moved. But it's there, like a 1,200-ton stone, cut out. When? Actually, we don't know. You cannot put a date on it. They would say it's back to the Romans' time, but Romans could not work stones like this. They were way too big. And 1 kilometer from here, you can find this, not the best picture, but there's a wall in the big foundation of a very big temple complex. Now the temple complex is a Roman temple for Apollo, so there's that's not debatable. But actually, but the foundation on which it is built is definitely much older. It's a completely different kind of stonework. The Roman construction you can see up here. These are much smaller stones here. Down here, stones are large, enormous stones weighing hundreds of tons. And these 3 stones here, they are each weighing 800 tons. They have been moved 1 kilometer from the quarry where the big stone of the pregnant woman is. They've been moved 1 kilometer and they've been lifted up 6 meters, up in the foundation wall and fit together so perfectly you cannot put a blade or knife in between them. How do you do that? That's the same question. But actually, who built it? Not the Romans. Romans could not. We know that in fact they could not move stones like that. And so they clearly built it on something much older. And how old it is, you cannot. It must be thousands and thousands of years old. So that's one thing. And how did they move these stones? I wrote an article about this particular thing once some years ago, and then I just to check out with I phoned to a crane company and asked them if they could help me. I had a big piece of massive stone, square stone, 800 tons. I needed it moved 1 kilometer, lifted 6 meters up in the air. Could they help? Can they? So then the lady I spoke with, she said, "Yeah, we can do it. We'll divide it up in parts and then we'll move it." I said, "No, you have to take the whole thing at once." I said, "Oh, I don't think we can do that. I think we need cranes from outside. From outside Denmark. We don't have cranes in Denmark that can lift that much." And then she asked, "Where is that particular stone?" And said, "Northern Lebanon." I said, "Are you joking?" and then explained what we're doing. Then she just transmitted to an engineer. I spoke with an engineer, and it turned out that actually until 1970, no cranes here in the modern world could lift more than 400 tons. Now they have cranes that can lift a lot more, but still they are often stationary cranes or cranes moving on rails where the whole ground has been particularly prepared and like that. It's to imagine moving these without cranes. Nobody had any idea how to do it. So with the primitive, Stone Age people with a club and hammers and chisels, or like that. And this is not unique. These are some of the very biggest of these massive megaliths you find all over the world, but you find them and they are in many places on the planet. And you just wonder how have they been working with these. You have them in, what is the next I have here? Yeah. This is from Bolivia, Cusco, famous street, which they say these stone walls there, stone walls to the right, and especially they say the Incas built them, but those who are also kind of a group of researchers are saying no, the Incas cannot build it. It must be much older. Incas were there like for 300 years until the Spanish came in 1500. It's a fairly recent civilization, and they did not have the ability to cut these stones, to move these stones, and to fit them precisely together as they are fit. And they weigh 20 tons, 40 tons each. And then they are, I don't know if you can see it here, they're cut exactly to fit into each other. Here's a picture, a little older picture. But this particular stone here is kind of famous. It has 12 corners. See, like this. That's how it is. And the other stones are just, when they're fit precisely. So you cannot fit a blade or a knife blade or a piece of paper in between. And they've been there, resisted earthquakes and so on for centuries and probably millennia. Then how old are they? It's this whole thing of dating and like that is it's actually a big issue. How old are things? Europeans have had a tendency to downgrade ages of any culture they came to, because the idea was Europe had to be the most advanced. So all other cultures, they must be just, a few hundred or maybe 1,000 years old like that. But
can one make comments now? Or
yeah.
Because I have been listening to people who say that they are at least 12,000 years or 13,000 years old.
Yeah.
And they also estimate, because there were some astrological things where the sun came or the sun. So they estimate like 12,000 years old by this.
Yeah. I don't have pictures from that here, but especially a place called Tiahuanaco, which is also in Bolivia, in the lake, Titicaca Lake, which has massive stone, stone structures and so on. And they actually have stone alignments, which fit with the sun as it was something like 12,000 years ago, 16,000 years ago. Yeah, I'd say that's a problem. Probably dates. There was a civilization, some would say it was the Ice Age civilization. That's what they talk about. And I believe that's how old they are. That's how old they are. But it's just that you find these stones all over the world, South America, everywhere. I only have this example here. It is, especially you see these cornerstones, how enormous these cornerstones they are. And they are not the biggest in South America. They are, you have stones that are moved that are hundreds of tons, and they have been moved. In this area is very mountainous. It's in the Andes. It's one of the most rugged places on the planet, and they come from one mountain down a deep valley, up another, like that, like in Machu Picchu, megaliths like that have come from, from mountainside down a valley up again. How did they do it? The Incas actually once tried to move a stone like that, because they kind of thought that somebody else could, we can also. And they tried to move a stone that was something quite heavy, but the whole thing collapsed under several hundred people were killed when they tried to move it. It was rolled down like that. So that's what comes next. Is that okay? Yeah. Just for as I saw before, India has many also mysterious stoneworks like that. This is Brihadeswara in Tamil Nadu. It's a Shiva Mandir. This is the main thing, this stone in the top, 80 tons, one piece of granite stone.
80 tons?
Yeah. It's 66 meters above the ground.
66.
How did they place it up here? Say 1,000 years ago. Again, I question that dating. It could be much older, but So India has, and of course I'm going to show other things from India, but India has many mysterious places like that. Here is another interesting phenomena you find. These are also, I mean, many of some of these enormous big stones, megaliths, they are, I mean, they fit together in walls, so you cannot fit a piece of paper between them. And then somehow the builders, in order to make them extra strong, did something pretty amazing. Then they made what they call keystone cuts. You have them here. Here's one stone, and then the adjoining stone has also a similar key cut. And then you fit them here. I mean, you fit them completely together, and then you pour liquid metals into them, and that harden, and then they don't move. So this technique is found in South America, Tiwanaku. It's found in Peru. It's found, you will see all the red, what was that? Yeah. See the red dots. Egypt, you have it here in Malta, I think it is, or is it Sicily, Tunisia, Greece. In India, it is there. Well, this is, okay, this is in Arab. In India, you have it. You find it in, I believe this is Vietnam, where they have it. In Japan, they find it all over the world, this technique. So, first of all, it's a pretty amazing technique. To have like a transportable liquid metal melter or smelter like that, you move, is quite advanced. And the metals they found inside these clamps that they create when they pour the metals into these keystone cuts, one place was an alloy of, what was it? Yeah, actually stated here, nickel. What was anyway? It's metals that require quite a high melting point, and even some of them contain what's called platinum. Is that the English word, platinum? Which melts at 1700 degrees, and platinum was discovered around year 1900, something like that. It was not known, but they found it has platinum inside it also. So that's also, I mean, evidence both of actually quite advanced technology way in the past, and we don't know again, I believe it's 12,000, 15,000 years old. Tiwanaku, one German who spent his whole life at Tiwanaku said he estimated 16,000 years. And then again, you find it all over the world. Did they invent this technique independently? I mean, this highly unlikely technique, or is just having one place, but having it all over the world. I mean, it indicates we're talking about one worldwide culture back in the ancient past.
Was it the same alloy in all places?
That I don't know.
But one has to also say that the water has risen 100 meters of continents went together before that. One could go from Asia to America by foot.
Yeah, some places were together, and that's. I was going to get to that at one point, but it's okay when you mention it's an absolute factor to understand prehistory, and also one reason why we know so little about prehistory, because the ocean level has risen 120 meters over the last since 20,000 years back. From 20,000 years up until like 8,000, 7,000 years like that. The ocean level rose 120 meters. So that's a lot. An area, something like the size of South America, has disappeared under the ocean from where it was. And, I mean, one can expect a lot of cultures must have vanished from there, because cultures tend to be along the coasts. some say 90% of all human culture must have vanished. Of course, one has to be thinking about it. It's not, I mean, 120 meters, but if it's over 12,000 years, still that's only something like 1 meter every century. So that you can kind of, you know, adjust to if it comes like only 1 meter every century. But so there are things that indicate actually it didn't come gradual, but actually the rise have come in a few very sudden bursts. We're talking about the ice melting from the last ice age, and there seems to have been, for example, up here in this area here was completely covered by ice. At one period during the melting time, a very large, practically like inland ocean was created of melted water, contained behind enormous ice dams or ice walls. And at one point, one of these ice walls seemed to have broken and let out all this water from. See, geologists say that actually on one such event, the ocean levels rose by 60 meters within a few days. So then you're talking about, I mean, this is cataclysmic.
There are also pyramids by Japan underwater.
There are pyramids underwater by Japan, yeah. Dvapara is underwater. Dvapara. I mean, if you talk India, I mean, you're probably aware of the excavations at Dvapara, and they found some ruins out there, big area of ruins. Other places, Mahabalipuram in southern India, Tamil Nadu, out there also under the ocean, quite deep water, there are ruins of, you know, of cities disappeared. So that's a, you know, an absolute fact. Much has disappeared. I'll get a little more to that afterwards. Also, touch upon it. Yeah. So here there are some examples of these clams from all over the world. Yeah. And of course, if you know, talking about prehistory and advanced cultures, I mean, there's no way that you cannot. You have to look at Egypt also, obviously, famous pyramids, but also so many other things in Egypt, and there's no way we can. I mean, I can, you know, even look at a fraction of what is there to look at. Pyramids, the three big pyramids are naturally very impressive. The big pyramid in the middle is the amount of stone there is something like 6 million tons of granite. It's a bigger amount of stone than all the stone that was used in the Middle Ages in Europe to build all the churches and castles and like that. And that has been transported something like I said 1,000 kilometers. I think it said miles last. I was just checking. Something like 1,000 kilometers from the quarry at Aswan. It has been transported, and I mean there's something to think about. But anyway, I was not planning to get into pyramids now. I just have a couple of other examples from Egypt which are equally interesting. Let me see what is coming next. Yeah. Is that something here?
Enigmatics.
This is an underground place. It is at Sagara.
Inside, within the tunnel, was megalithic blocks that weighs tens of tons and an elephant. So we calculated a block that weighs 50 pounds, Ibrahim, at least 2,000 men. And there's no
metal box installed over here.
So it was all the way, all the difference. What we see here was not the better, because you can't accomplish lots of work in the open with the right amount of people. Because to gather 2,000 people to drag a block of stone is not an impossible job. But to have this done inside the tunnel, that's crazy.
So all these in the original place?
Yeah. Yeah.
How we know?
So you can see here one of the boxes of the Sarapino rock with the rough surface. If we follow the Egyptological way of polishing this one, then we will be having few men with sand and rocks polishing the surface. if this works anyway, there's still no space for these men to work. So when we see the other ones also inside the chambers that's finished, how would this be finished if you don't have space for the people to be working around? Basic and simple question.
So here Yosef is one where the lid has been slid back.
Yeah.
And again, it's believed that the boxes themselves weigh how much?
7 ton for the box and 30 ton for the lid. So the total of 100 ton for the box and the lid in the range.
And this is not local stone.
No, this is not local stone.
Where was it brought from, do you think?
Not closer than Aswan, which is 1,000 kilometers from here.
Well, as you've heard Yusuf say, the box and the lid, of which there are more than 20 of them, each one in its recess, weighs about 100 tons. The stone is from at least 1,000 kilometers away, and yet the official statement is that these were made during dynastic times, the late period, as burials for sacred bulls, the Apis bull. However, the level of tolerance and engineering and finish in this incredibly hard stone, which the dynastic Egyptians did not have the tools to shape it, tells us that we're looking at an older construction than what Egyptologists say, from probably several thousand years ago. And the only way that these boxes were quarried, moved, and put into place underground here and finished would have been using forms of technology that not only the ancient dynastic Egyptians did not have, but that we also do not have to this day.
So you can follow
What technology was it you needed?
well, I mean, I don't think he knows, but you need technology technology, first of all, to move these stones, and how do you get them down, and 100 tons of stones down underground under these narrow conditions and like that. It's absolute mystery. Then how you finish them, how you polish them, how you carve them out, and like that. I mean, it cannot be done, at least with hammers and chisels, which they would have been telling us it was done with. And again, and the axe is also, I mean, as he said years ago, but they did not have the technology to do that. So that, actually, in one sense, they complete a mystery, what they are, what the purpose was, how old they are, and so on. Egypt has many things like that. Some say that this is a bigger mystery than the pyramids.
That one.
Yeah, and similar. There are whole collections of, these are massive stone bases, cut out of one stone. Actually, this is not even completely representative of the mystery. You have vases like that, which are like swans or geese. They have a very thin neck and then a big body. And then, of course, there's a hole down in the neck, and then it's completely hollowed out inside. One piece stone. How do you do that? Some say that's even bigger mystery than the pyramids. So Egypt is filled with that. Here's a Sphinx. Sphinx is, of course, famous. Is it the biggest sculpture in the world? Or maybe I'm going to show you, India has a bigger sculpture, natural sculpture, or sculpture, like a mountain cut out. But at least these two are competing. This one, the Sphinx, or the one I'm going to show you a little later, competing to be the biggest sculpture in the world. And generally it's said that the Sphinx, if you ask like conventional archaeologists, 4,500 years old. However, in 1992, one American geologist, Robert Schoch, along with in research, what was his name? West, you know? Was it Johnny West? At least they made studies of the Sphinx. They got permission, not even permission to that, but they got permission to come and make studies of the Sphinx. And the geologist, Professor Schock, he carefully investigated and he concluded that the whole body of the Sphinx is heavily water eroded from massive rainfalls. You know, torrential rains actually for thousands of years. Now, there has not been rains in this area for 7,000 years. And which means, and we have to go again back something like 12,000 years when the climate was different, tropical and very moist and like that. So that's very, very strong evidence that at least the body of the Sphinx is much, much older than they would have us believe. And also the temple that was there constructed in front of the Sphinx must be similarly old because that is built from the stones that were cut out when they carved out the Sphinx. So they would, I mean, generally also according to its orientation, that it's a lion and some astronomical calculations. I mean, you might say the alternative Egyptologists saying it must be something like 12,000 years old. Of course, the conventional archaeologists say that was the response in the 92 when the geologist came out with his study, said it's not possible. And the main objection was actually we have no evidence of any culture in those days which were able of making such carvings as a Sphinx represents. And of course the geologist said that doesn't matter, we found it here. But the archaeology said, but if there were such an advanced culture, there would be much more evidence at all in other places. Now that argument doesn't doesn't hold any longer. From the beginning of the 2000s, and this is standard archaeology, in Turkey, the place called Göbekli Tepe, has been excavated actually a big complex, stone complex city, which is dated now to around 12,000 years old, and their stonework is just as advanced as the stonework of the Sphinx. Here, some of it, and these pictures give only a little idea about what it is, but we did, again, stones weighing 30-40 tons, being transported uphill. It's on the top of a hill. It's a massive area. I don't have the exact area. Someone knows? Maharaj, you know this?
I've read about it, but I don't have.
It's one of the biggest archaeological discoveries in our generation, actually, because but it's on the top of a hill, and it's something like it's definitely several hectares, and they have only excavated a little area so far. There's more to find. But it's 12,000 years old. There's these massive stones, there are beautiful carvings on them. And then something like 5,000 years ago, the whole place was covered and buried. Intentionally. It was on the top of a hill. Somehow or other it has been buried. And not far first now they are again excavating it. So to build such a place, again also to bury it, is a enormous jobs we're talking about. So actually, they are admitting that now there were advanced civilization that could make stoneworks like that 12,000 years ago, and that so that again objection to the age of the Sphinx does not hold any longer. So that's one more, again, more stones, and another discovery, quite a recent discovery, which has not been so much accepted by modern archaeologists. Actually, that's an interesting phenomenon. You have found actually, you might think that the pyramids in Egypt are the biggest. They found bigger pyramids from like 2004, something like that. Something like that. They found bigger pyramids than the Egyptian pyramids. And there's no question they're pyramids, they're man-made. The archaeologists say they're not there. And they say they're natural hills.
It's in Bosnia?
Here. Let's see.
Yeah, but-
Here, this is Bosnia. This is the Krishnas.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
a
yeah,
proof
it's
then.
a proof. It's a proof.
This is a proof. Maharaj has been there. We've been talking about the pyramids in Bosnia. Maharaj has visited them on several occasions. He took me on a trip 2013. Was it 13? 14?
Probably, something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure that, yeah, clear that date there. July 3rd, 2013, we were there. And how is Maharaj? How many pyramids are there?
They calculate 6 or 7.
Yeah.
In one valley.
Yeah.
There's like a valley and there's a river. And they had like 6, 7 different, let's say, pyramids. So
Yeah.
a little bit different character.
Yeah. We visited 2 of them when we were there.
Yeah.
Plus the tunnels they found
The
it.
tunnels, yes.
So the 2 biggest pyramids, we were there. We were walking on them and like that. They call them the Sun Pyramid, or the Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon, which are just names they've given. I mean, they have no idea how old they are, but who built them and what their function was and the names of them. But they just call them the Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon. And here, Maharaj is on the top of the biggest pyramid. It is both the 2 biggest pyramids in Bosnia are taller than the biggest pyramid in Egypt. The biggest pyramid here is 225 meters tall,
Yeah,
and the second pyramid is 190 meters tall. And let's see here. Here you have a little maybe enhanced picture like that. I don't think that, do they actually get this energy ray there? I think that is Photoshop.
that is a creation of the. There's the energy array, something going on, but it's a creation of the imagination of the exactly how it looks like.
Yeah. But aside from that, it is actually this is a pyramid of sun in Bosnia. They look like mountains at first glance. They're completely covered by soil and forest, but on a closer look, you'll find out they're perfectly pyramid shaped, 4 sides, completely oriented according to the north, south, east, west. Actually, they are even more precisely coordinated than the Egyptian pyramids. The Egyptian pyramids are very precise, but the Bosnian pyramids are even more precisely oriented.
Have you been inside? Because there are people who are showing how it's inside.
We were inside the tunnels.
You can get to the tunnels. That's where the closest you can get, and it's close to the inside. But
you cannot get in. They haven't excavated chambers inside the pyramids yet, which you can get into, if there are any.
There is definitely chambers or something, because there's many indications of the hollowness of that pyramid.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a big. I mean, you can say that you can hold whole lectures about this Bosnian pyramid and the phenomena around it, and the ecological communities refusing to accept that they're there. Of course, it's completely turns everything upside down. There's not supposed to be pyramids in Bosnia, and they're not supposed to be 12,000 years old, or 15,000 years old, or 26,000 years old. I think they have different dates.
Yeah.
Some datings. I mean, some part of this is old, some part is that old. But I think that kind of they would say 15,000 is kind of minimum.
Something like that.
Yeah.
There is a film more than 1 hour on YouTube about this.
Yeah. Then there's a whole. I heard just a whole lecture, 2 hours with this. Was it Samuel Osmanic?
Osmanic. Samir Osmanic.
Osmanic.
Sam.
Yeah.
In English.
So, but here she's. I mean, it's just minimal. There's some excavations, but of course not at all. Not everything has.
This excavation is on the Pyramid of the Moon.
Yeah. And as you uncover it, they remove the soil. Then you get down to this actually very beautiful stonework there.
And this kind of stonework you find also just next to the Pyramid of the Sun and other places of the valley.
Yeah.
So it seems like that whole valley was basically paved with this sandstone. And this sandstone, again, when you look closer, someone said it's a natural creation. But when a professional came there, and was the story one of the guys told, he came and then he saw this. Oh, now I understand. He said, no, this is made by humans because you can't. He's working these stones. You know. Fit in such a way that it's not just some sandstone that cracked, because then you wouldn't get such exact lines and such a kind of corners, etc. on the individual stones.
So.
I go there because I like it. It's really good to jump up there, okay? And then in the tunnels there, it's also kind of interesting. Say Gayatri there is like quite an experience.
And here you can see this is a pyramidal moon. Actually, the space of pyramidal moon is really, you can see the distance, you know, completely perfect in pyramid shape. So anyway, that's the Bosnian pyramids. What do we have coming up next?
Mahabalipuram.
Oh, yeah, just to go back. Yeah, then now I'm going to have examples from India of the big megaliths in India. The first is called Bhima Stove. It's a massive stone that weighs 1,700 tons that has been moved. Bigger than
it's 1,700
tons. It's bigger than this. The first stone we saw, this pregnant woman stone, that's weighed 1,200 tons. Now we're going to see one stone in India, 1,700 tons.
That's more.
That's bigger. Yeah.
That's bigger.
That's bigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mahabalipuram in India, and let's take a look at this unexplainable rock structure called Bhima Stove. Locals believe that it was built by a giant who was more than 12 feet tall, and I will show you some solid evidence that it was in fact built by a giant. But first, let's see if this structure could have been built by humans at all. The specialty of this structure is that the rock on the left, which weighs a massive 1,700 tons, has been lifted and made to lean on a relatively smaller rock on the right. Archaeologists and geologists agree that this is not a natural formation.
Okay, so just thinking there's more about it, but isn't it? So there's a next one also from Mahabalipuram. There's another very mysterious stone there.
Hey guys, we are at Mahabalipuram in India, and let's take a look at this mysterious giant rock called Krishnas Butterball. The specialty of this rock is that it stands on an extremely small base, less than 2 square feet area, on a slippery hill. Just imagine what would happen if you place a ball on a slope. It would roll down right away, but this rock has been in place for at least 1,200 years. This granite rock is over 20 feet tall and weighs over 250 tons. With its width almost equal to its height, it looks like a sphere in some angles, but it's not a perfect sphere. You can see a lot of people sitting under it, which gives you an idea of how big it is. Many people think of this rock as a natural formation. However, such a natural formation is impossible because there is no way it would have come to this shape by erosion, flowing water, or blowing wind. You can see that the rest of the area is a smooth hill and is devoid of any other large rocks. So if it's not a natural formation, who could have put it here? Even in modern days, moving a 250-ton rock uphill would be a very difficult task and require complex equipment like cranes. How was it done 1,200 years ago?
And again, the date, who knows how old it is.
But they mentioned giants. Do you have something about giants? We are now excavating so many huge skeletons of giants.
No, I mean...
so this could explain also a lot of...
Could be giants. I mean, you know, you talk about Dvapara Yuga people, they were giants compared to us. Before that, they were even bigger, but I don't have giants here, but I know there is evidence and like that. I haven't looked. You looked much more into that than I have, but yeah. But they are. I mean, they found giants. They have found skeletons of giants. That's what and footprints, and of course there is histories like that. But I don't have anything here about it.
I can show you later.
Yeah. What do we have next year? Yeah, just to take, just give another idea. I mean, there's so many places that, I mean, this is just the top of the iceberg. But here, this is a quite interesting place. This is a we are on an island called Pompeii, which is in called Micronesia, which is kind of the western part of the Pacific Ocean, kind of is north of Guinea, New Guinea, and that area in the Pacific Ocean there. The small islands, it has an area of something like 600-700 square kilometers. Small islands, like it's smaller than the Danish island of Bornholm, if you know that. So it's quite a small island, and on that small island there is an ancient megalithic city built partly on the beach and partly out into the ocean. Maine is kind of like a Venice of the Pacifics. Very, very old. Built, constructed from, let's see here, of course, basalt, very solid, massive granite blocks, and covering an area of, let's see what we have here. Yeah, covers an area of 75 hectares. How much land do you have here in Almvik?
Well, 120 hectares altogether, I think.
Okay, so it's kind of, 2/3 the size of the whole Almvik area has just been made an artificial city. The amount of, there's a number here of 750,000 tons of stones. There's more stone, more than that. I think it's 7 million tons of stone have been moved to construct this city with walls and canals and so on. And let's see. And then the big problem is they don't have these stones don't come from this island. Where do they come from? That's a big question. I mean, how do the stones, they weigh up to 50 tons. How did they, in simple canoes like that, transport stones, 50-ton stones? Now, it might be the stones might come from a quarry that might be close, but under the ocean. But actually, it turns out, again, conventional archaeologists don't look into this because, but alternative archaeologists have been actually diving outside, and they find actually this city goes, out into the ocean and goes down quite deep. But again, that's controversial because then you have to go back like something like 12,000 years when when the ocean level was lower, and that again. Archaeologists are not willing to admit there was advanced civilization that could build stone cities like that 12,000 years ago in the middle of the Pacific. But
the level of the sea, that it was much lower before, that is not debatable with the...
No, that's standard geology. Yeah.
The standard.
Yeah. So again, and you have these places all over the planet begging for explanation. You have even, other places like, how many knows that actually there's a pyramid in North America that's bigger than the big Egyptian pyramid?
I don't know.
It's called in height not, but in the amount of material. It's bigger. What is it? It's called Monk's Mount. It's in Illinois. And it's not a stone structure. It's mainly made of earth and soil and some stone like that. But there's a very massive. North America had at one point something like 30,000 mounds like that. Many have been just plowed down because of development like that. And you don't hear much about it. Apparently because the general history that Europeans and the new settlers in America they like to hear is that they came to in an untouched virgin land. There were no people here. It was just natural, and they cultivated and they developed it like that. There were civilizations and there were big genocides at that time also. So yeah, something like that. So anyway, I say there's so many things. Easter Islands, of course, is a very mystical place. So many, but cannot. Here, I think back to I have some interesting things from India now again.
Based on a tip, I traveled to Kanchipuram, which is 300 miles from Hampi, and here we can see the chains hanging from the hooks on the corners of the ceiling. Yes, these chains with many links are in fact made of stone. Archaeologists have confirmed that these are made of stone and were created at least 700 years ago. How could anyone create these stone chains with primitive tools? Even today, such a technology is not possible with modern machines. What kind of machines were used in ancient times, and how were they able to create these chains made of rock? But this is not even the main problem. The problem is that while the stone chains are made of sandstone, the ceiling is made of granite blocks. So how could they connect two different types of rocks at this junction? We know for a fact that this is impossible without melting the rocks. There is no way to connect two different materials using links unless one of them is melted. So these rock chains prove that the ancient builders did in fact melt the rocks and changed its density like modern day alloys.
Yeah. So that's Kanchipuram is a famous place. So they have rock chains hanging down from the ceiling, and they are two different stones connected. And how did they do that? He says they definitely melted them, but he doesn't know either. They did something we don't know how they did. And these rock chains are there. They're also in Hampi. They're in different places like that. So.
Kanchipuram, that's the Ramanuja tribe.
Yeah. So now we're going to go into another temple, Haileswara temple. I think that's in Andhra Pradesh. It's a Shiva temple, and we're going to look at some different amazing things at that temple.
In this video, I'm going to show you some solid evidence of ancient machining technology at Haileswara temple. There's something very strange about these pillars. If you look closely, you can see these minute circular marks all around the pillar. These are created as a result of machining the pillar on a lathe. This process is called turning. There is no way to achieve this with chisels and hammers manually. If you look at these pillars, it is crystal clear that they were made with machines. In fact, archaeologists agree that these pillars were created in a lathe, but offer no convincing explanation as to how these huge pillars were machined 900 years ago. Nowadays, we are able to create these fascinating grooves and designs on a lathe, but machining a 12-foot tall stone pillar would be a very difficult job even today. So, how were these pillars created with amazing perfection in ancient times?
Yeah, it looks quite amazing, yes.
Yeah.
How old is this temple?
Well, they say it's 1,000 years, 1,100 years old. I'm sure it's older. Sure it's much older. That's why I say my belief is these are Dvapara Yuga temples. but of course, I can say it's true.
Yeah, well, that would make sense.
Yeah.
And against solid stone, is it granite, the whole thing, or what is?
It's granite.
So, I mean, it could very well last for.
Yeah, I mean, it can last 1,000 years, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
That's not the, granite is very hard. It's one of the hardest stones.
Here, you can see a very strange device in the hands of a god
Still
called Masana Bhairava. This clearly represents a type of gear mechanism called planetary gears. The outer gear has 32 teeth, and the inner gear has exactly half the number, or 16 teeth, which is precisely how we use reduction gears today. If this were just an imaginary tool, how could the ancient sculptors come up with this gear ratio of 2 to 1? Even more interesting, we can also see a fastener that goes around this mechanism and is locked in the center. Today, we use the exact same technology. We use something called a circlip lock or a snap ring to keep these things in place. If historians are right, how could primitive people working with chisels and hammers imagine such a mechanism? Let's go into the deep, dark areas of the temple and see if we can find more evidence. Here is a 7-foot-tall god with the most uncanny ornaments. His crown is adorned with skulls, which are less than 1 inch wide. I realized that I could pass a small twig through one eye and it would come out through the ear on the other side. The twig can also be passed from ear to ear and also ear to mouth and any way you want. What does that mean? It means that the entire skull is hollow inside. It is impossible to remove the inside of a small sphere, which is only 1 inch wide. Even with modern machines, this would be very difficult, but we know for a fact that creating a hollow sphere inside of such a small rock is impossible with primitive tools. Even more interesting, we can shine a flashlight between his head and crown, and the light shines through. There is a very small gap between the head and the crown. I tried to slide the same twig, which is about 3 millimeters wide, but it would not go through. This means that the gap is less than 3 millimeters wide. How could anyone create a small gap less than 3 millimeters wide with chisels? Is it possible that the small skulls, crown, and other pieces were carved out of separate rocks and then fixed together? No. Archaeologists confirm that this 7-foot-tall figure is made out of one solid rock.
Well, okay, how to do that? So next, I think there's another very interesting place in Maharashtra, Ellora Caves. Someone knows? Ellora?
Ellora.
Ellora.
In Maharashtra.
Maharashtra. Yeah. Anyway, it's a place where 34 temples have been carved out into a mountain like cave temples. And you see something from there. It's a very famous place.
We are at Ellora Caves in India, and I'll show you the real reason why it was not built by ancient human beings with chisels and hammers. If all these structures were built by scooping out rocks from mountains, where did all the removed rocks go? The real puzzling fact is that even if you search around Ellora Caves, you won't find any large pile of rocks. According to archaeologists, what you see in Ellora is 34 different structures, all created by scooping out rocks from mountains. In case you're not familiar, there are no natural caves in Ellora, but all the mountains were simply converted into artificial caves. Let's take with conventional history for a little bit and see if it makes any sense. If human beings did in fact carve these mountains, there should be enough debris of rocks to build at least an entire mountain. For example, this is the Kailasa temple, and all the space that's empty was originally made of rocks and they were scooped out. In fact, the amount of rock scooped out is more than the amount of rock that is still standing. In many of the 34 structures, this is the case where the amount of rock removed outweighs the amount of rock that we can still see. What this actually means is that if we can get a hold of these removed rocks, we can build a structure larger than Ellora caves. In modern earth moving, you can see huge piles of rocks left over even for a small project. So how much removed rocks are we talking about? In just Kailasa temple alone, archaeologists estimate that over 400,000 tons of rocks were scooped out, and this is just from one temple. Imagine the amount of rock removed from 34